Hello, everybody. Omni here. I just got out of Spider Man Into the Spider Verse, and while it's still fresh in my mind, I wanted to go ahead and give a quick review of this film. I loved this movie. It's hard to put this on the same level as Marvel Spider Man Homecoming because it's kind of like it's still two different kind of mediums. They're both on film, but it's really hard for me to compare those two because up until now, I would say, you know, Homecoming was my favorite Spider-Man on-screen film. But this one, I don't know how to judge those two compared to each other, but this movie is solid. It definitely fires on all cylinders. And if you haven't seen my previous videos where I covered the trailers and my reactions to those were a very, very accurate representation of what we were going to get in this film. Now, I do want to get this out there a little bit because it's a little bit of a concern, at least for me, and I know for other people. I don't know how many people that suffer from like audio visual cues and stuff like that in films, like flashing lights, all oscillating colors, and stuff like that. This is not your movie. Just the opening credits alone would be a trigger for anybody with that type of condition. And there was no kind of warning going into the film, not at the beginning, not anything like that. So that's something that kind of bothered me. I don't know if it was just the pre screening version of the film or maybe if that's going to be in the wider release. I don't know, but I feel like that was a little weird to leave that out there. But anybody that watches this, if you suffer from any kind of condition that is triggered by lights, colors, or anything like that, unfortunately, I would recommend staying away from this movie. You will have an issue really quick into it. But aside from that, this movie was fantastic, and that art style that they went for with the like bringing the colors and the comic book page style, like you have the ink dots in the background and a lot of things, action lines, text on the screen, like it's a living breathing comic book, and like even where they kind of like reduce the frame rate to give like a little bit of a jitter effect as the characters are moving, not quite stop motion, not quite anything like Nightmare Before Christmas, but like it definitely has a unique flavor to it. So guys, I'm going to go ahead and let you know I'm not going to go into any heavy spoilers for this film, or at least in this review, but I will give a little general breakdown of what to expect and what the general plot of the film is. As you know from the trailer, we are following Miles Morales, who is a more recent addition to the Marvel Universe in the comics. He is a younger kid from Brooklyn who also happens to get bit by a radioactive spider. Um, he also is not from the same reality as the Spider-Man, the mainstream Spider-Man or Peter Parker that, the general public or you yourself may know. So that's kind of where things get a little bit interesting because he is alone when he gets to try to learn. When he gets his powers, he has no frame of reference on how to use them or anything like that. But there's this event that happens that we see in the trailer that starts to bridge different realities together, and that's where we're introduced to the other characters in this movie. We get different variations of spider people from different realities who are being banded together to try to prevent the collapse of all reality in these, and that, ending everything, which is where we're introduced to the mainstream Peter Parker. And this is at the this Peter Parker is pretty much an amalgamation of every iteration of the character that the general populace might know. There's like hints at the Sam Raimi films. There's hints at there's hints at Homecoming in there. There's all kinds of different references from all kinds of different Spider-Man media. And he is at this point in his life where he's just raggedy Peter Parker. Everything on his end at his life is kind of fallen apart, and so we kind of get this reluctant mentor role. It starts off he's just wanting to get home. He's just trying to figure this out just so he can get home. Miles is trying to get him to help him understand his powers. So there's this like relationship that builds between them that just kind of blossoms throughout the film. And after we're introduced to Peter Parker, we're next introduced to Gwen Stacy as Spider Gwen, who on her reality was bitten by the spider instead of Peter Parker. After Miles is introduced to Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy, the team is later filled in by three other additional spider people from different realities. We got Spider-Man Noir, which is from a reality that is basically set in 1930s America. So it's a lot more noir based, that style of investigative storytelling, where he's everything's in black and white with him. He's always narrating stuff. There's a lot of internal monologuing with him, and the fact that he's voiced by Nicolas Cage makes all of that even better. Along with him, we have Penny Parker, which is from an anime and Japanese style world. So her animation is different from the rest of them because Spider Man Noir is obviously black and white. Hers is a lot more Japanese animation. And so there's a lot of exaggerated movements, a lot of exaggerated facial expressions. Um, her spider abilities are a little lessened because she just pretty much pilots a mech suit, which is typical of a lot of anime if you don't watch that kind of stuff. And last, but definitely not least, it's Spider Ham from a universe of anthropomorphic beings, and he was a spider. He was a spider bitten by a radioactive pig, and thus turned into a pig superhero, and is very much based in like early Warner Brothers animation. So he's got all the cartoony powers that a lot of those characters did, like indestructible, pulling out large objects out of just nothing, and he's definitely a bit much in this little team. Also, his secret identity is Peter Porker to make matters even better. Despite that tonal shift between these characters, they all kind of carry their own style and they have their own voice in very meaningful ways for Miles. I feel like they all kind of contribute to his growth into being a hero by the end of the film. But the whole thing is just how all these different versions of Spider Man, through different iterations, different realities, different writers originally, come together to prevent the collapse of all of reality. And despite all of that complicated mess, the pacing in this movie is really slow and steady, and when it needs to be, the action does pick up. There is not a beat that is misused that I felt in this movie, and I had a lot of fun from beginning to end. Miles' relationship with his family's relationship with Spider Man and vigilantes kind of affects him, and kind of the typical coming of age story for like somebody who is pressured into doing what their family wants over what their heart tells them. There's a lot of heart and emotion in this movie, a lot of sick awesome action, and one thing that makes this movie pop so much is the art style. It does not take away at all from it. From the trailers, I was wondering if it'd be a little much, but good lord, every shot in this movie is beautiful. I love the art direction in this movie. Another thing, the soundtrack is so good. Normally, when you have like hip hop or modern music put in as the background composition of a movie, sometimes it can be a little bit jarring, but I felt like every song choice, every musical cue matched what was going on the screen. None of it ever felt like it was distracting me from what was going on. If anything, I feel like all of it elevated what I was watching on screen. The way they incorporated not only the visuals, but the sounds and the music into this threading tapestry of a film. This was just, I don't know. It's been a long time since I've seen an animated movie that really hit every point for me. Honestly, I can't think of too many negatives that I even have about the movie. Um, at some points, it does get a little slow, I would say. It does slow down just a little bit at certain parts, but the movie, once it gets going, it goes, man. I had a lot of fun with this. I highly, highly recommend watching this movie. Um, it is definitely one of the best on-screen portrayals of any of the characters of Spider-Man. This is a beautiful, awesome introduction for the character of Miles Morales, which I knew his backstory, I knew of him, but he wasn't the Spider-Man I grew up with. I do know about how he came to be because I kind of followed it around that time, but I was never really properly introduced to the character, and this was a great way to do it. If you don't know the character of Miles Morales. I feel like this is a great representation of that character, and I would love to see more adventures with this character now. Um, yeah. So I don't really have anything else to add to it except hmm, I think okay. My only negatives with the film per, are a little more personal. Like the movie itself, I don't think did anything wrong. I think well, I have a couple of minor complaints. And it's I kind of wish they would have went a little bit further with Penny Parker because there's some moments where she doesn't look like she's animated too differently from the other ones. There's some moments, of course, where she definitely does pop and stand out, but I wish they would have went a lot harder in the way they did with Spider Ham on her style to make her look more like an anime. It seems like there's a little too much of an American blend with the way they presented her on screen. Um, Only other complaint would be sometimes Spider Ham was just a little too much, and he's definitely he is definitely the standout character in this little team. And sometimes he fits in with them. Most other times he's just kind of like, why why are you here, man? Sometimes he's just a little much. But talking about structure and the film elements, I feel like everything else in this film worked. Aside from those minor complaints with Penny Parker and Spider Ham, there's not really too much else I can pick apart in the movie that I didn't really like. I grew up with Peter Parker as my Spider Man, and this version of Peter Parker is in a rough spot in his life, so it is a little weird to see him being, for me, being like a little bit of the disgruntled, grumpy man. It's a little odd, but like it works for the story. That I understand why that needed to be like that. It definitely left room to grow for his relationship with Miles and his relationship with Miles helping him with his own issues going on in his Earth. And that really worked out. It's just like I said, it's just a little bit weird because the Spider-Man the last time I connected with Spider-Man, I was like, "Oh, that's a little weird." I wouldn't have pictured Peter in that point, but that's the thing. Spider-Man is just an average guy. Anybody could have been bitten by that spider and become Spider-Man. The person behind the mask, which is the message in this movie and even in the comics, is just that Spider-Man could have been anybody. It just happened to be Peter that got bit. It just happened to be Miles that got bit, happened to be Gwen, and so on. These people, it could have been you if you were in this reality. That's the beautiful thing about Spider-Man. That's the beautiful thing about Marvel in general is that you can put yourself into their shoes. You can project yourself onto any of their characters. You can project your reality on them. There's a lot of things that you can see or relate to in these characters that kind of ground it for you and it makes it easier to connect with them. I will say make sure to stick around till the end. With all the pre-screenings, early reviews, and projections for the film, and with me having seen it today, I can definitely agree with those. But Sony is really pushing behind this movie. They are already starting production on a bunch of different spin-offs of this film and its characters. I know they've already announced they're going to be making a Spider-Gwen animated film, and I'm excited to see where it goes from there because finally, I think this is something that stands on its own, unlike Venom or unlike their non Marvel assisted projects. But there's a lot of potential with this film, this franchise here. I don't know how it's going to connect to their overall Spider Verse they're trying to create throughout Sony with their live action properties and now this animated side of things. I don't know if those are supposed to mesh. They've been very vague on how that's all going to be structured, but I'm very confident and happy with what they've got here in this little animated bubble. So if that expands and succeeds, then I am more power to them. I'm definitely excited and on board to see more. I recommend you definitely check this movie out. It is a fun ride. Anyway, guys, that's about all I've got to say about the movie. I would love to know what you all think when you get a chance to check it out. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I always love reading and responding to those. Aside from that, if you like this and you'd love to support the channel or see more, definitely go back and watch some of my other videos. Subscribe to the channel if you'd like. And you can also follow me on the Stardust app for shorter reactions to movies and TV shows that I keep up with. But aside from that, I'll probably catch you guys next week with Aquaman. Catch you all later.